Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode 225 of the podcast, or you're joining me live on Facebook or YouTube. Today is Sunday, January 24th, one day removed from UFC 257. Obviously, the biggest event of the year so far in the MMA world. I'll be solo today, unless Jeff the Animal Wilson decides to pop on. He's feeling a little under the weather. He didn't want to be sniffling on the air. So unless he takes some Afrin and clears up his sinuses or something, he may jump on, but probably not. Otherwise, just me talking UFC 257. I'm not going to start where you would expect me to with the main event. I'm going to start with my buddy Matt the Steamroller Frevola. I have so much respect for this guy, and not just because of this weekend, but even more so because of this weekend. So a lot of you may not have followed the drama surrounding Matt Frevola this weekend. If you were paying closer attention to the Conor McGregor press conferences and all that stuff, maybe you didn't hear about it. So Matt Frevola was supposed to fight on the main card of the pay-per-view against Ottman Azaitar, who's a knockout artist. I think he was 13-0 or 12-0, something like that, with 10 first-round knockouts, something in that neighborhood. But what happened was Azaitar and his teammates cut their wristbands off. So to get into Fight Island, you have to, go through a series of quarantines and a series of COVID tests. And, they're very strict about a lot of this stuff to try and keep everybody safe and make sure that nobody gets infected while they're putting these events on. And that's been very successful up until now. So Azaitar and his teammates cut their wristbands off, somehow got them to somebody on the outside who taped the wristband back together, snuck into Fight Island, got into the hotel, made his way up to a room, but it wasn't Azaitar's room. So he had to scale across 4 balconies to get into Azaitar's room, delivered him a duffel bag of unknown contents, changed his clothes, and then tried to leave back through the hotel lobby where he was approached by security. He refused to stop for them. And now is probably having his fingers and toes cut off somewhere in Abu Dhabi. I don't know what happened to him. He was turned over to the authorities. He was cut from the UFC on the spot. So forget about being removed from the card. They don't even want him in the UFC anymore. That's how serious this violation was. So, I can't help but wonder what was in the bag. Like, what was he trying to drop off to Azaitar? The only thing I can imagine that would benefit his performance would be IVs, which IVs are, they're not allowed according to, the new regulations with the UFC. Well, new as in, I think it's been around for 2 or 3 years now that they're not allowed to use IVs to rehydrate after cutting weight. But it's also, there's no way to detect if somebody has used an IV unless you have like a really sophisticated hydration test or something like that, which they don't do. So that would be my guess that that's what was in the duffel bag. I don't think he was bringing them like Skittles or something, or maybe he was bringing them pork because pork is actually illegal in Abu Dhabi. So there's nowhere to have it. Maybe he needed to have that after his weight cut. I don't know. Nobody seems to know what was in the bag. I need to know what's in the bag. I'm generally not a very curious person, but for some reason it's driving me crazy thinking about what could have been in that bag, that this guy had to scale across 4 balconies like he's, in a Jet Li movie or something. I think it was my buddy Dan Tom posted the clip of some Jet Li movie where he climbs down the balcony and he's holding on and he hops down to the next one, just gripping with his hands. In any case, so that fight gets called off, just like the last 3 fights that the Steamroller had booked in 2020. He had an opponent pull out, and then he had one of his cornermen tested positive for COVID, so he wasn't allowed to fight another time. And then the third time he had a knee injury. So it just seems like he's got the worst luck. Well, it turns out that Arman Tsarukyan was supposed to fight Nasrat Haqparast, and Haqparast disappeared. He didn't show up for the weigh-ins. I guess allegedly he was having so much trouble making weight that he didn't even show up to weigh in. And then Tsarukyan weighed in anyway, luckily, but he missed weight. Now, who knows what happened there? Maybe he heard that his fight was off and he stopped his cut. I don't know. But luckily, Matt Frevola, like a professional, went and weighed in, made weight without an opponent. Tsarukyan went and did not make weight. Now, they're in the same weight class, so they were able to negotiate a fight. Now, here's why I have so much respect for Matt Frevola. He had the option to take his show money, take his win money, not fight, and just hang out in Abu Dhabi and then go home with his full paycheck. He opted instead to fight Tsarukyan, who's ranked number 19 in the world, risk not getting his win money just so he could have a fight. And that's why this dude's a real fighter, man. And I don't just say that because he's my boy and because he's been on the podcast and because we train at the same gym. I say that because that's what real fighters do. He didn't want to just take the easy paycheck and go home. He wanted a fight. He wanted to test himself. He wanted to challenge himself. And unfortunately, it was a gamble that didn't pay off for him. He got in there with a guy who was overweight, was not the same style of fighter he was preparing for. He was preparing for a knockout artist and got in there with a guy who was very grappling heavy in there. Held his own, but was just a step behind. Tsarukyan, to his credit, did a great job timing the takedowns. Frevola is such a monster. He's so hard to hold down, so hard to submit. He's a guy that, you'll rarely see struggle in the grappling department in the gym, and he grapples with some monsters. Brown belt under Matt Arroyo, and then also trains with Matt Sara for jiu-jitsu back in Long Island. So credit to Tsarukyan. He won all 3 rounds clearly. It's hard not to be bitter when the guy didn't make weight, but at least he did show up to the scale so that Matt was able to fight. I know that was more important to him than, walking away with some free money for doing nothing, because, the guy's a true warrior. He really wanted to get in there and test himself. And now he knows where he stands, with the elite of the division, a guy that's ranked in the top 20. He knows, what he needs to work on. I'm sure he's going to learn a lot from this experience, and he's going to come back stronger. That's just the kind of guy he is, and that's the kind of fighter he is. And I'm definitely proud of him for getting in there when he didn't have to. I can't praise that enough. So big shout out to the Steamroller, for getting in there and fighting on the card. He didn't get to fight on the pay-per-view. I know he was excited to be on the pay-per-view with Conor and Poirier, but at least he still got something he wanted, and he didn't get 4 fights canceled in a row. So that's a good thing. I'm sitting here with these headphones on, and I found my headphones in my daughter's room, and the cable was completely snapped off, and the little plug was still stuck in the headphones. I had to pull it out with some pliers, and I was around scrambling, trying to find another cable, only to realize that I didn't need headphones today because Jeff the Animal Wilson isn't here. But I guess if he does decide to pop in, then at least I'll have him handy. But yeah, daughter broke my headphones. So what are you gonna do? She's 3 years old, and I've learned there's no sense getting mad over things a 3-year-old does. So found a new cable anyway, so everything's fine. All right, let's get into some fight talk, shall we? If you guys are feeling like participating, let me know where you're watching from or listening from, and what you're drinking here with me. I happen to be drinking some bourbon with a little Cointreau and a splash of lemonade. Nice. It was kind of warm here in Florida today. It got up to like 78 degrees. So nice bourbon lemonade is really hitting the spot. So cheers, everybody. All right, let's start at the main event, shall we? Dustin Poirier with the redemption story over Conor McGregor. The build up to this fight was so weird because these guys hated each other so much six years ago. But now, this fight got started when Conor, was frustrated he couldn't get a fight. And so he was like, hey, Dustin, let's just fight for charity, because there's nothing in their UFC contracts that says they can't do a bout outside of the UFC. If they do, if they're not getting paid, they can fight outside the UFC. So this is how it started. And let's see. That's how it got started. So, and then Dana White was like, "Hey, if you guys are going to fight for free, I want to promote it. Let's just do it in the UFC." So here we are building up to this fight, and Dustin is giving Conor hot sauce at the weigh-ins, and every interview Conor is talking about how great Dustin is and all the things he's doing with his charity. Very different than the build up to the first fight when they were both a lot younger and more mature. Shout out to Cody over in Jupiter, Florida, drinking a bullet on the rocks. Very nice choice, my friend. I miss you too, buddy. Former training partner who moved all the way across the great state of Florida. And shout out to Allison in Houston drinking gin and seltzer. I'm not a big gin person myself, but whatever gets you through a Sunday afternoon is cool with me. So, yeah, the build up to this was so strange, especially because there was so much animosity after the first fight. Conor knocked out Dustin in the first round. So it was strange to see them so friendly leading up to this and talking about charity and giving each other gifts and, stroking each other's egos. It was very strange. And I wasn't feeling the hype leading up to this. I wasn't that excited when the fight was announced. I wasn't that excited, during fight week. I was more looking forward to, the co-main event, Chandler and Hooker, and a few other fights on this card. Matt Frevola, obviously. But then when the fight started, man, it was a great fight. So in the first round, Conor clearly came out in a boxing stance. And I believe his intentions, and he said this explicitly, his intentions were to win this fight and then get a boxing fight with Manny Pacquiao. And that's a fight I'm even less interested in. I realize it would probably be a blockbuster payday for those guys and good for them, but it's not something that, I would shell out any money for. I definitely wouldn't pay to see that. I would watch it, but I would use some other means, which I know that's been a hot topic of conversation lately, which has been pretty hilarious. So the fight started and it was awesome. Conor came out in a boxing stance and he was actually outboxing Poirier. He was landing some shots. He was a little bit quicker. His timing did seem a little bit off. He whiffed on some strikes. And Poirier just seemed like off his game plan. Like he didn't have a good warm up or something. Like he was moving a little awkwardly. And then he hit this beautiful overhand left into a double leg outside trip, took Conor to the ground and held him down for about 2 minutes of the first round. So that was an awesome strategy, get him tired, get him grappling, get some blood pumping in his arms so his muscles fatigue. Definitely a good strategy by Poirier. And then they stand up, and I was kind of surprised to see that Conor was the stronger of the two inside the clinch. He's holding Dustin against the cage. He landed some of those patented shoulder strikes that gave Cowboy Cerrone so much trouble a year ago. And then he landed some open palm strikes to Dustin's nose. At the end of this thing, it looks like Dustin had a broken nose. So, he definitely took some hard shots to the face. He joined the Andrei Arlovsky Nose of the Month Club. So it was very back and forth, and then Conor was piecing Dustin up at the end of the first round. So if I were scoring this fight, I would have given the first round to Dustin just because he was able to control so much of the fight on the ground. He did land some big shots, but with MMA judges, they typically have a recency effect where whoever's winning at the end of the round will typically win the round. So I didn't see any of the judges' scorecards, but I imagine at least one or the two of them scored the first round for Conor. Then in the second round, Dustin started to find his rhythm a little bit. He was landing some shots. They were going back and forth. He landed some heavy calf kicks on Conor that Conor wasn't checking because he was in that heavy boxing stance. Now, when you're in that boxing stance, you kind of like lower your level a little bit. So there's a lot more weight on your legs, which makes it harder to check the leg kicks. And it also makes them hurt a lot more. The kicks hurt less with the less weight that you have on your leg. I didn't do well in physics in high school. I damn near failed it, but I've been fighting pretty long to know that it hurts if you have more weight on your foot. So that's what happened there. And, then Dustin used one time I saw him use the high elbow block that he was using so effectively against Max Holloway in their fight. And once he did that and countered off of it, he just rallied a fierce combination against Conor, knocked him out. First time Conor McGregor's ever been knocked out. He's been submitted a handful of times, and never been knocked out. Hardly ever even knocked down. I mean, Khabib knocked him down with that big shot in their fight. I can hardly remember another time Conor even getting knocked down. I mean, he's very good at not getting hit, or he was. So he chalked it up to the inactivity. Obviously, Dustin's been a lot more active than Conor has in the past 6 years, and especially with the quarantine and everything. So his timing was off. What will be interesting is to see what happens from here on out, because you have a division where the champion says he's retired. The promoter of the organization says he's got one more fight in him and he really wants to see him take it. But it seems like Khabib is done. I've kind of been saying this since the beginning. I don't expect him to come back. If he does, cool. I don't see him coming back to fight Dustin Poirier. We already saw that. We saw, we saw how that one went. And all the respect in the world to Dustin Poirier, I don't see it going much different. I don't see, what he could do differently against Khabib, and Khabib thinks as much too. The only fight I can see him getting excited for is Michael Chandler fight. So maybe if Chandler and Poirier fight and, Chandler looks impressive there and then calls Khabib out, maybe that will get him off the couch, but, maybe not. Khabib may be perfectly content just coaching. Speaking of coaches, shout out to my Muay Thai coach, Crew Matt McCusker, who's tuning in right now. He says time eventually catches up to all of us, and that's the truth. So I've been feeling a lot of that in sparring sessions myself, Crew. So yeah, that's what happens. I mean, Conor and Dustin are both in their prime right now. They're both 32. So they should be feeling the best they've ever felt. But at the same time, it's the beginning of the end, folks. That's when the body just doesn't respond the way it used to. Once you start approaching those mid 30s, your body just doesn't do what your brain's telling it to the same way anymore. And it doesn't help if you consume a lot of alcohol. So make sure you enjoy your spirits in moderation, kids. So yeah, I assume the next fight will be Poirier against Michael Chandler. So let's talk about Michael Chandler, man. Here's what happened with this fight. As soon as I saw the clip of Dan Hooker warming up in the locker room, I said he's going to lose tonight. He just looked so flat. He looked so tired. He looked really pale. I don't know if he had a tough weight cut. I don't know if he had, diarrhea the morning of the fight. Now, keep in mind, they are fighting in the morning. because it was in Abu Dhabi. So I think the co-main event was probably around like 9 a.m. UAE time, just so it could air prime time here in the States. Whatever the case, Dan Hooker looked horrible warming up, and then walking out to the cage, he looked really sick. Like he looked like he was gonna pass out or something. He looked like a walking cadaver. And then Chandler came out, looking like the Ultimate Warrior, just fucking. he's like running circles. He looked like he sparred 10 rounds in the locker room. He was soaked with sweat through his shirt. He came running out. He's jumping up and down in the cage. And, Hooker just didn't have time to even realize that he was in a fight. So Michael Chandler just stalked him, was careful about the range of Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's about a half a foot taller than Michael Chandler and had, I think, a 6-inch reach advantage there. So Chandler was bouncing in and out of the pocket, doing exactly what he needed to do. And he did the typical wrestler level change into an overhand that put Dan Hooker down. And then there were 11 unanswered punches. I watched this when I watched the replay. I counted them, 11 unanswered punches before Mark Goddard stepped in there. I don't know what he was waiting to see. If Dan Hooker was just gonna like come back to life, like even if he was a cat, he'd be dead because he was well past 9 lives. But Michael Chandler, man, looked phenomenal. I thought his path to victory would be to pressure Dan Hooker and push him up against the cage. I knew he had the power to knock him out. I didn't see him knocking him out that quickly. I thought it would take a little longer, but again, I really thought Dan Hooker looked out of it. Like he looked like he didn't want to be there. And Chandler was just the opposite. He brought so much energy into the cage and brought it out of the cage too. I was such a fan of Michael Chandler's performance until he got on the microphone and just was cringing it up. I can't even recount for you what he said. I just remember cringing so hard. It was something like, and Khabib, you need someone to be 30-0, and maybe that someone could be me, but maybe it won't be, because maybe I could win, and then I won't be 30, and I'll be the one that beats you. And he just kept I felt like he just kept going with it, and it was so fucking terrible, man. Somebody should be like giving that guy some statements to put in his pocket for these situations, or just tell him like, don't talk, man. Like get a translator in there for him or something. Like pretend he only speaks I don't know, German or something. And like just have a translator talk for him. Like don't let that guy on the microphone. And it's a shame because I like Michael Chandler a lot. I've been a fan of him as a fighter for a long time, but the guy is his own worst enemy when it comes to his image. He's getting out there and talking about, follow me on Parler, and I'm a big Donald Trump supporter, and calling people ignorant who don't support Donald Trump. And it was like, okay, like whatever. I don't care what your politics are, but you have to realize that you're kind of polarizing your audience a little bit. Like you're pushing away 50% of people who are potential fans of you with your political statements. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to be that good at fighting and also be good at talking. It's very rare. You have your Israel Adesanyas, your Conor McGregors, and Chael Sonnens, and there's only a small handful of them. But man, I just felt like he ruined his own moment just by not being able to handle his time in front of the microphone. But all that being said, I think it was probably the most impressive performance on the card. Given the fact that he was coming from Bellator, he said he didn't feel any pressure, but man, you sign a big deal with the UFC. You're making a ton of money and walking in against a top 5 guy. If you go in there and get smashed, that's the whole reputation of Bellator on your shoulders that gets smashed with you. Because, you're a champion over there and you come over here into the top 5. If you get crushed by a guy in the top 5 that's not even the champion or hasn't even been in a championship fight, what does that say about the organization that you came from? Now, luckily it didn't work out that way for him, but that's a tough one. And then Dan Hooker took his gloves off at the end of the fight. It looked like he was really frustrated, took the tape off his gloves, took his gloves off, which typically is a sign of retirement. I think he was just really disappointed in himself. I think he knows that he was not on his game when he got in there. I think he knows he was flat. I think he knows, he knows whatever it is that we don't know. Maybe he knows what was in Azaitar's duffel bag. I don't know. I don't know what Dan Hooker knows. Only Dan Hooker knows what Dan Hooker knows. But whatever it was, whether he was, sick that morning or a bad weight cut or he had an injury, whatever the case. So that was that. And, Michael Chandler wins his UFC debut in devastating fashion. I love the fight between Chandler and Poirier. I think that's a really fun fight. My second pick would probably be, Chandler versus Khabib. That would be a fun fight. I definitely don't think that happens though. So let's rule that one out. Chandler versus Charles Oliveira. That's a really fun fight. I have a feeling that Chandler is going to be able to turn around a lot quicker than Poirier. And I worry for Dustin Poirier that he thinks knocking out Conor McGregor is going to buy him more time than it will. So he was talking about, I want to take some time off and this and that. That's great. I know he's a family guy. He wants to get back to his family in Lafayette. But, don't think the UFC is going to wait around just because you knocked out Conor McGregor. If anything, they're probably upset that happened because he's, the biggest star that they have. And now they have to deal with a highlight reel of him getting knocked out, of him sleeping on the canvas and all these memes that have been coming out. He's the new Bernie Sanders sitting in a chair meme, is the Conor McGregor sleeping on the canvas meme. And, I definitely don't condone that stuff. I don't like seeing, people getting made fun of, when they get knocked out. I don't care how you feel about them personally. I don't want to see that happen to somebody just because I don't like them. There are fighters that I don't care for, but I don't want to see them get hurt or get injured or anything like that, because I know the hard work and sacrifice that they put into getting to where they are, and the, everything they put on the line to just get in there. And then that happens to them in front of a global audience. That's a shitty thing. How you feel about them personally is another thing. Like, I hate all of Conor's antics, hitting old men and obviously the sexual assault stuff is horrible. But I try not to pay attention to all that negativity. Like, you guys, those of you who listen to the show regularly know I don't talk about Conor unless he is about to fight or he has just fought. I don't talk about any of his antics or his, drug use or whatever crazy shit he's doing outside, whatever, baby mamas and whatever else he's up to. I don't give a shit. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I imagine they're going to do Poirier versus Chandler, and then they're probably going to do Oliveira versus Gaethje. But again, I hope Poirier doesn't decide he wants to take some time off, because then they'll be like, all right, cool. You go hang out in Louisiana. We're going to do Chandler and Oliveira for the undisputed title. We'll call you when we call you. So hopefully Poirier is wise to that and, answers the phone, when they're looking to get him back in there, and he's able to heal up and have a quick turnaround. I think that would be his best shot at getting to a title quickly, because he definitely deserves it.
I mean, he just knocked out Conor McGregor, first person to ever do it. So, yeah, of course he deserves to fight for that title. And I think Chandler does as well too. You know, with the performance that he had, you know, coming into making his UFC debut against a top 5 guy. That I don't know if Dan Hooker's ever been knocked out. I need to look into this now. But yeah, definitely impressive. And okay, he has been knocked out one other time. Oh, right, the Edson Barbosa fight. How could I forget that? That was one of the most brutal beatdowns I've ever witnessed. I still wake up in the middle of the night sometimes thinking about that fight, and I just wake up in a cold sweat screaming, "Stop the fight." In any case, let's move on down the line here. Jojo Calderwood with an impressive victory over Jessica I thought it was looking rough for Calderwood in the first round. I thought Jessica I was landing some nice shots and was controlling the pace a little bit. I scored that first round for Jessica. I didn't see how the judges scored, if it was 30-27 or 29-28. But Calderwood, man, those front kicks to the face were pretty nasty. And you know, I saw somebody was saying, like, can we just put an end to Jessica I in the UFC? And that's fucked up, but I thought it was kind of funny. She is very strange. But you know, she's always in these fights. You know, she had the last fight was a decision loss to Cynthia Calvillo, and then she beat Viviane Araujo. And then of course the knockout at the hands of Shevchenko. But you know, she's got a win over Caitlin Chookagian, win over Jessica Rose Clark. You know, she's been very hot and cold. It seems like when she gets into those high pressure fights, it's when she struggles. But Calderwood looked good, man. I don't know what you do with her there. Like, can you really? I mean, she lost to Jennifer Maia in her last fight, and she's got a loss to Caitlin Chookagian. Man, I don't know. I don't think you can put her in there with Shevchenko. She's 2 for 2 in her last 4 fights. But there's just nobody to fight Valentina, man. It's such a weird phenomenon where she's just so dominant there. And yeah, you're right, Allison. The slow-mo of those kicks, those are pretty special. If you guys missed that, make sure you go back and watch at least those highlights from this fight. Yeah, that's we haven't seen those in a while. You know, there was a while where those front kicks were popular. You know, Lyoto Machida and Anderson Silva. Those front kicks to the face are not something that you see too often. Makhmud Muradov with the flying knee TKO of Andrew Sanchez. This was wild, man. He hit him with the knee, and then Sanchez, I don't know how he stayed standing, but somehow he managed to stay on his feet. His legs were going in every direction possible. Finally wound up finding the cage to lean against, and Muradov just came in and finished him off. This was an interesting fight. This fight was the one that was moved to the main card to replace Frevola versus Azaitar. And Sanchez is another guy that's interesting, man. You know, when he came into the UFC, he was basically a wrestler, and then out of nowhere, he was like knocking people out, but then he got knocked out a couple of times. And I don't know, it just seems like he never really found his groove. I know he's up at TriStar, so he's got a good camp there, but Muradov looked good, man. That finishing sequence was pretty brutal. He's from Uzbekistan, 30 years old. And he is now 25-6. That was only his 3rd fight in the UFC and his 2nd knockout. And he actually has a win over Alessio Di Chirico, who, you guys may remember, knocked out Joaquin Buckley last week. So yeah, maybe Muradov against Buckley. That would be a fun fight. I'd like to see that one. I don't know about you guys. Marina Rodriguez, I think, with an upset over Amanda Ribas. This fight, Herb Dean kind of fucked up pretty bad. So it was a second round TKO. At one point, Rodriguez had Ribas down and I was really beating on her. And Herb Dean stepped in and touched both of the fighters, which is the signal for them to stop. So they did, but then he didn't wave off the fight. And then it was kind of weird because Rodriguez was like, is the fight over or is it not? And Ribas was standing up, just getting her legs back under her. And then Herb Dean was like, come on, fight. And then Rodriguez, knocked her out standing pretty much. But, I think she definitely took some unnecessary punishment there. That was definitely a big mistake by Herb Dean, who has been pretty good lately. So, that's that. I don't know. Let me know what you guys thought about that stoppage. I think pretty much everybody's going to be on the same page about that one. Then, of course, we had, Tsarukyan with unanimous decision over my buddy Matt Frevola, who once again, I believe is going to bounce back better than ever from this. Brad Tavares with unanimous decision over Shoeface Antonio Carlos Jr. This was a weird one because Tavares could have finished the fight in the third round. He had Shoeface like basically knocked out, and then he hit him in the nuts and gave him time to recover. It was like, it was a kick. It was just like, slapped him across the side of his cup. He did it like it was a sideways like nut shot. It looked pretty bad. But in any case, luckily for him, he won the decision. Julianna Pena submits Sara McMann. This was a very competitive fight. Very fun. Back and forth. McMann, obviously the better wrestler. Julianna Pena, I think, came into this fight with only like a 20% takedown defense, which, I think she just doesn't fight takedowns very much because she's so good off of her back. But she was able to get on top of McMann in that third round and then finish her with the rear naked choke after a few other submission attempts. Marcin Prachnio getting the unanimous decision over Khalil Rountree. This was a very back and forth fight. Two guys that were just throwing big power shots at each other back and forth and not really putting a whole lot of combinations together, which I understand is typical for that weight class. But it was a close fight. Prachnio coming away with the decision. I think that went the right way. And then Nick Lentz. Somehow this was a split decision. I'm looking at this now. I don't know why this says split decision because Evloev it just beat the shit out of him. Nick Lentz had a tight guillotine in the first round. I guess you could say it was close, but after that it was all downhill from there. And this Russian kid just beat the brakes off of Nick Lentz. I imagine he's going to get cut. The only way he could get cut faster if he sneaks a duffel bag into Fight Island and scales across some balconies. But yeah, Evloev 14-0 now. He's got 4 wins in the UFC, all by decision. He was begging Dana White for a top 15 fighter, which, he's clearly got the skills. He's got some really crisp striking. He's got fast hands. He busted Nick Lentz up, man. Nick left that fight pretty bloody. And then the first fight of the night, Amir Albazi getting the win over Zalgas Zhumagalov. Yeah, and that was a pretty fun fight too. So, good card overall. It was good. I wouldn't say it was like the greatest card ever. There was a couple of lulls in there. The Muradov Sanchez fight was like, okay. Even the Tavares and Carlos Jr. fight, there was exciting moments, but it was, a little bit dry. But yeah, a lot of exciting drama. We had people climbing buildings and stuff. And, Conor McGregor gets knocked out for the first time ever. That I'm sure was huge headlines today. Huge sports headlines in general, at a time when we're during football playoffs. I think there's a football playoff game going on right now. I don't know, because I don't really watch football. But yeah, a lot of fun stuff happened on this card. The debut of Michael Chandler, it was a historic card. I would think too, eventually, Poirier and McGregor are going to have to fight a third time. And I believe Poirier is undefeated in rematches. So it'll be interesting. I mean, they're 1-1. They both knocked each other out. So I imagine that eventually they have to run it back a third time. I don't know what you do with Conor right now. I would guess that the Nate Diaz trilogy would be next. That's probably what they're going to want to do with him. They did say that they have a big fight lined up for Nate Diaz. I think the plan was that if Conor won, they would talk Khabib into coming back for the Conor rematch. And if Conor lost, which he did, they're probably going to put that Nate Diaz fight together pretty soon. That's my prediction. And, I'm wrong all the time. So who knows what's going to happen? Maybe that, maybe not. All right. I think that was it for UFC 257. I do highly suggest following my buddies Matt Frevola and Billy Quarantillo. It looks like they were having a blast on Fight Island. Even after he lost the fight, they were having some beers in the hotel room, and Billy was like kicking pizza boxes around the room. It looked like they really enjoyed themselves. Even despite the outcome of the fight and all the drama that happened. So we'll give those two guys a follow. They're both really good guys, both really phenomenal fighters. And I'm not just saying that because I train with them and they can beat me up. I genuinely mean it. Because even if I knew that they were going to beat me up and I wanted to talk shit about them, I would still do it. But I don't, because they're both good guys. We got some time off until the next card. UFC Fight Night 184 is going to be February 6th. So I think I'll wait till next weekend to really break this one down and get into it. But fun fights on here. Alistair Overeem and Alexander Volkov is the main event. Co-main event is the one I'm really looking forward to. Corey Sandhagen and Frankie Edgar. And then jumping down this card a little bit, you got Cody Stamann and Andre Ewell. That's a really fun fight. Diego Ferreira, Beneil Dariush, Michael Johnson and Clay Guida. That's a really interesting one. You got Devontae Smith on here. Nico Montano is on the prelims. You may remember her as was she the first flyweight champion? I can't even remember now. It was very short-lived. She came off of she was a huge underdog on the Ultimate Fighter, wound up winning the show, winning the championship. Yeah, so we'll wait until next week to get into this one. Again, if you guys have anything you want to talk about, feel free to reach out to me at MMA on the Rocks everywhere on social media. If you want to get a hold of Jeff and tell him to get well soon, it's at @animal_Wilson on Twitter and Instagram. Shout out to Team Reaper, reaper1.co. They're the ones that make our t-shirts and hoodies. So if you do want to get an over the top, under the influence t-shirt or hoodie, go check those guys out. As always, I'll put a direct link to our merchandise in the show notes, wherever you are watching or listening. And wherever you are watching or listening, please give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, share some episodes. That helps other people find the show. And I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate everybody listening to me talk for close to an hour. My throat's starting to get kind of dry. This is when I really wish I had Jeff so I could take a break here and there. It's no easy task to keep talking for an hour. I know, first world problems. You guys are like, whatever, Bill, shut up and
go have some more whiskey. And to that, I'll say I will. So until next time, cheers, everybody.